Have you ever heard of George Pullman? Kind of an interesting story attached to this gentleman here. We have the Wikipedia write-up, which I'll just go through for you. Um, Famous for the Pullman sleeping car and also founding a town in Chicago where the workers could live to the ones that worked on his sleeping cars basically gave them a place to live. Also the Pullman strike and the Pullman porters, which apparently is frowned upon historically because he used the well, you can see here and you could click on it if you want to. But let's get into the chronology of this gentleman because it's really interesting. We have born in 1831, son of Emily Caroline, and his dad is a carpenter, James Lewis Pullman. This is important because his father is the one who invents the machine using screw jacks that could move buildings or other structures out of the way and onto new foundations. That he patented that in 1841, we are told. Oh, and before we go any further, I'm going to scroll to the bottom here for you. So down here at the bottom, we get this little write-up here, and I'll let you read that yourself. Give you a few seconds, and then we'll get back to the chronology here. So his family moves to Albion, New York, along the Erie Canal in 1845, so his father could help widen the canal. That was the reason for moving, we're told. And then when they get to his career, they tell us that they don't really tell us a lot about the education. It's not like this prestigious education. But he does take over his father's business at the age of 22, so very young business owner. And they jump right to his achievements. For what they say here, in 1856, Pullman won a contract with the state of New York to move 20 buildings out of the way of the widening canal. So Pullman becomes the building mover, taking over his father's invention. I have mentioned this incident in the past, the Chicago raising of the buildings in Chicago, and I'll read through it a little bit more for you. I can't remember what video that one was in, or if it was in one of my live broadcasts, but it's a pretty important part of history. During the 1850s, the streets of Chicago resembled a swamp, we're told, as the city was too low of an elevation in relation to the lake. So we get a program undertaken to re-engineer the sewage system and the raising of the streets over a meter, and as a result, the buildings would have to be raised as well. So that's the option they say. The buildings were either going to be demolished and rebuilt or physically raised to meet the newly raised level of the street. In 1859, Pullman and his fellow Albion-based business partner, Charles Moore, they moved to Chicago to raise one building, the Madison House, large brick-built hotel. They go on to raise several more Chicago buildings before becoming a part of a consortium that raises the entire 98-meter long block of 4- and 5-story buildings. And of course we have a lithograph provided for us as proof of that happening. Eventually they end up raising, in 1861, the 6-story high Tremont House, and this is the best part. Pullman contract to raise these and many other large buildings in Chicago, on average 6 feet, without causing them any damage, and oftentimes while the buildings were still fully operational, with people entering and exiting them and conducting business within. So this is the early days of Pullman. But now we get into Pullman's sleeping car enterprise, let's say. The Palace car was his thing. So he develops a sleeping car, a railroad sleeping car, designing them after the packet boats that traveled the Erie Canal from his youth. The first one of those finished in 1864. And we get a blurb about President Abraham Lincoln After his assassination, Pullman arranges to have his body carried from D.C. to Springfield on a sleeper. Illinois. I had to check the state because there's so many Springfields in the States. And that gave him national attention, apparently, and that's the explanation for the kickstarting of his business of building these rail cars. So orders for his new car began to pour into his company as a result of Lincoln's funeral procession. Let's see, the sleeping cars proved successful even though they cost more than 5 times the price of a regular railway car. Does that make sense to you? Marketed as a luxury for the middle class. He introduces the President, one of the models, a sleeping car with a kitchen and dining car, and the Delmonico, which is a sleeping car devoted to fine cuisine. And here we have the African American freedmen, as Pullman porters say. He employed the most African American men after the Civil War in his company. There's that blurb right there. So in 1869, he gobbles up Detroit Car Manufacturing Company, and then he buys the patents to Central Transportation Company, 1870. So the Great Chicago Fire is happening in here. No mention of that, well, in his narrative, though. In spring of 1871, he, with Carnegie and others, bail out the financially troubled Union Pacific. So he's doing this in the year of the Great Chicago Fire, which is interesting. And they're basically saying he's building his fortune at this point. They also include an interesting quote from this French social scientist. Everything is done in order and with precision when visiting the manufacturing complex. One feels that some brain of superior intelligence, backed by a long technical experience, has thought out every possible deal. Remember the roots of Pullman, not all that extravagant, let's say. Remember, he takes on the business at 22 and he hits the ground running. This is interesting, the Pullman Company town. In 1880, he buys 4,000 acres and he hires this architect, responsible for these buildings, to design his new plant there. Trying to resolve issues of unrest and poverty, he also builds a town adjacent to the factory, featuring housing, shopping areas, churches, theaters, parks, hotels, libraries, and all for his factory employees. 1,300 original structures were designed by the same architect. And I'm just going to quickly jump to, 1880 he purchases the land, and then in 1885, I have a quote here from this reporter from Harper's Weekly, who claims that the power exercised by Otto von Bismarck was utterly insignificant when compared to with the ruling authority of the Pullman Palace Car Company in Pullman. So basically what he's saying is Pullman is running this place like a dictatorship, this town. But this is in 1885, so this also implies that this town has gotten a chance to get its feet under it by the time this is happening in the town. But remember, he only purchases the property in 1880, so we are to believe within that 5-year period, how many buildings? 1,300 original structures are designed by Solomon Spencer Berman. Busy boy. Busy boy. Now all of this, all this restriction he puts on the people of the town leads to a strike, the famous Pullman strike in 1894. Now, of course, we are told in the winter of 1893-1894, at the start of a depression, he decides to cut wages by 30%. Now, why is this date important? Well, the Chicago Columbian Exposition was held in 1893. So in that same year, everything is tanking. Everybody's losing money. Maybe they're all spending their money at the World's Fair. And that was the reason for the depression. But the timing of all of that is absolutely clear, especially in this case where Pullman is actually in Chicago, and he's tightening the purse strings You think this would have been a time of economic boom with them hosting such a massive exhibition, but that wasn't the case. So on May 12th, 1894, the workers went on strike. This would have been around the time that the World's Fair buildings are being demolished and burning down and being demolished. Not far away from that time frame. But yet the workers here are going on strike now. So it must have been a catastrophic time for the city directly following this World's Fair. Curious timelines, of course. They go into a big, long-winded dispute about with this a big battle with this Eugene Victor Debs. Apparently he has enough pull to get the railroad workers across the nation to organize strikes and shutdowns and things like that. But it gets to a point where Pullman calls on the president at the time. Here they have it. When violence broke out, he gained the support of the President Grover Cleveland at the time for the use of United States troops to quell the uprising, I suppose you could say. On July 8th of 1894, again the year following the Columbian exhibition, soldiers begin shooting strikers. They say 34 people are killed in these incidences, but apparently it was effective in dispersing the strikers. Pullman flees while this is all going on, we're told, but nevertheless his reputation is soiled by the strike. Yada yada yada, I get the idea. He goes down in history for being a horrible individual. On October 19th of 1897, he dies of a heart attack in Chicago. He's 66 years old. And that's the story of George Pullman. And I just figured while we're at it, let's take a look at Pullman's hometown, I guess, of Albion. Here we go, Albion right here, right in that Erie Canal area. Now it's actually classified as a village, and you can see here there's not much population growth going on here, despite the fact that we've got over 100 years of time passing. And let's take a look at the architecture. Just a small file for you, just to give you a taste of the visuals in this very small village of Albion, New York. And you're getting these types of picturesque views of downtowns that look like they've been there for quite some time. They're telling us that this is a tannery, the remains of a tannery or something along those lines. You took out the brickwork on that chimney there. Why would you need to put that flare there or that atop? And there's a little gate on top too, so that's interesting. And you've got all sorts of these stone churches. Of course, they'll say the roots of this town, the settlement in this town, going back to the early 1800s. I'm not sure if that's supposed to explain away the architecture. They'll say most of this architecture was done late 18, early 19s, as usual. I won't get into the details, I just wanted to bring you some of the visuals briefly here before we move on. There we have a date, 1897, and I got that after the fact plastered on the top of the building. Nice stone facade and very aged looking brick here, damaged possibly looking brick here on the side. And just a taste of the types of roofs you're likely to see. And some construction. Maybe this is construction over top of an old foundation. Just speculating. But an interesting looking church steeple here. Again, the stone, the amount of stonework. And no doubt this is typical of so many of the small town America, and the level of detail that you see in many of these small towns, not having a lot of it left, but usually there are a handful of buildings still standing in the downtown core that you can point to as a question mark, really, something that flies in the face of the narrative that we are given about these locations. Nice stone foundation. Again, maybe it's a veneer. A pristine looking brick. And the very steep roofs with the decorations on top. Is it just decoration, or this has to do with the antiquitech, as they say? The old high school, made of stone, still stands. Here it is in the modern day. Doing a bit of a combination here of the Catholic buildings. Again, stone. So very interesting. This region of the States is absolutely riddled with this type of architecture, and if you're from an area that has a lot of these visuals, a lot of these stone and brick churches, certainly suggest getting out and digging a little deeper into the narrative of your region. As we are peeling back the layers and the lies of history, the half-truths, whatever it might be. You can see 1882 on this one. Again, I think these are founded. These dates are the founding and not the construction dates. These are repurposed structures, in my opinion. And it's looking to be more and more the case. So definitely peel back the layers in your area and, look into the local Masonic organizations and the dates that have been plastered on those buildings that you've walked by every day of your life. And let's dig a little bit deeper into these communities. And I think if you look, you don't even have to look that close. You'll find that the thread unravels pretty quickly. So that's Albion, New York. In this segment, I wanted to introduce you to Monsanto. No, not the American agrochemical company that somewhat recently changed its name to Bayer. Bayer, one of the famous German-based companies coming out of World War II. It's funny how Monsanto needed a facelift reputation-wise and get bought out by Bayer. Anyway, I digress. I'm talking about Monsanto, Portugal. And you can see the pin here. I'm going to be looking at visuals from this region here. And as we scroll through the visuals, I'll be reading some of the Wikipedia write-up on the region. You can see here they start with the history in just about 1200 AD. And looking into that history, we get a whole plethora of settlement. They do go back to the Romans. They say the Romans settled there and created a base. The Visigoths apparently in the early Middle Ages, and then the Arabs as well come through here. Take a look at the block work going on here, reminding me a lot of places like Cusco in South America. And then we get the Christians taking it back over from the Moors. There's the Moors, which come up a lot in this old world research. 1165 is when they say that happened. And the king, Alfonso, at the time apparently grants stewardship of this location to the Knights Templar. Some Gualdim Pais, Portuguese crusader and a Knights Templar. So we're getting a little bit of that secret society flavor already going on with the history here. And why am I highlighting this place? Well, this one probably tells you the reason why I believe there's more going on here than we're being told. I'm looking at this through the lens of a fried circuit board Earth and post-cataclysm remains. And what I believe we're looking at here is not natural, but the result of or the after effects of that cataclysm. And we are getting a blend of what we call man-made and what we now call natural. And we get into the little geography blurb here on the Wikipedia write-up, and they do mention that the mountain is granite, and we have villages that are built in a fusion of nature and its landforms. So there's that word fusion. We have the natural and the man-made fusing together. It's even in the mainstream write-up. I'm just going to walk through the visuals that I collected from this region, and you can see the blending here, actually, of the two. Very difficult to envision this being made independent of the surrounding area, making sure everything is level. You can see how wide these things are as well. Not a very adequate explanation given for the construction of these either. Oh, we moved back. Let's go forward here. There we go. There's a nice visual of, you can see actually the rows of blockwork, and I mean, I can't explain how that this could turn into this. I don't even think this is the original form, but definitely you've got 2 rows of blockwork going on here, and it makes you think of, you know, a larger structures and mountains, and how can you say mountains are melted buildings or post-cataclysm buildings? Well, you can see, if we have blockwork this size turning into blockwork this size, you can imagine how large this would become. And I know for many people this is quite a stretch, but this is the evidence that I'm seeing in my research, and it becomes clearer the more you look at it, the more you see it. So if we can remove that denial filter, that mechanism in our minds that says, no, that can't possibly be, I already have a framework of the past and I'm sticking with that. If we can remove that and begin to explore other options, you get all sorts of strangeness like this becoming difficult to explain through the conventional narrative. Interesting, this line here as well. Is that a roof line? Very odd, that one. The boulders of Monsanto. This is interesting too. It's a bit grainy, but you can see the wall blending into stone back here. You get a nice blend. Very interesting. Certainly worth sharing. I came across this in my investigations, and I thought it was worth sharing with you, just for the anomalous strangeness of these structures. So we're to believe that this rock was here, and then they infilled all of this below. It seems a little strange why you would do that. Wouldn't you be worried about this rock toppling and crushing you while you live in there? Some interesting lines going on here. And even have it built right into the places you can stay, working around all of this. Of course, it's been parched in here. That's what that white grout would be. I did a little research into Monsanto, the company, as well, starting in St. Louis, Missouri in 1901, so right in the thick of that time frame, right before the World's Fair, interestingly. The company named apparently after the maiden name of the founder, John Francis Queeny, the maiden name of his wife, hailing from the Iberian Peninsula, so there is a connection between this location and the company itself. And not a lot of positive coming out of Monsanto. I don't know if you're familiar with its history. Things like DDT, Agent Orange, bovine growth hormone, genetic modification of seeds have all the trouble coming out of India, with the seed patents, or not just India, anywhere, seed patents and Monsanto seeds blowing into farmers' fields, and then those farmers getting sued because they're using Monsanto seeds because they're growing on their field. It's just a horrible story. One of the monsters, corporate monsters of this last century. Now somewhat common knowledge about how monstrous they've actually been. So much so that, like I mentioned, they got bought out by Bayer, and the name fades into history. No doubt trying to cover a dirty reputation. But like I said, I'm using Bayer, a company connected with IG Farben and World War II. Whether you believe any of that story, it's just curious that that would be the name you use to clean up your reputation. It's funny. I find it funny. Anyway, this has been Monsanto, Portugal. The very curious case of the massive boulders and the remains of the old world. Very poorly explained in our historical narrative. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.